And what's going on, Pewter peeps? Welcome in to this latest episode of the Pewtercast, your favorite spot for all things Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Alongside Ren Dax, I'm Steve Carney. It is great to have you here live streaming on YouTube and on Periscope. And if you're listening to the audio podcast, happy July 1st for you. We have gone through most of the NFC South so far here in this off-season divisional preview. I want to thank Mike Neighbors from Cox Sports Television and D. Orlando Ledbetter of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution for joining us to talk about the Saints and the Falcons, respectively. But today, it is all about the Carolina Panthers. And joining us for this episode of the Pewtercast is the Grand Poobah of the Riot Report. He is the editor-in-chief of the Riot Report and the
new title. That's exciting.
You like the Grand Poobah, do you there, Josh Klein?
I'll take it.
I like the Grand Poobah. You've got the Riot Network going on with about a half a dozen different pieces of content. You know, you've got like half a dozen podcasts going on, you know, all this stuff going on. I've checked it out. I'm very jealous because you guys are really got your stuff together there for the Panthers. But we appreciate you getting on here. What got you started interested in creating the Riot Report? Because this is obviously something that's gone on or taking over and taking it to where it is.
Sure. Well, obviously, first of all, thanks a lot for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. I assume all of these Bucs fans are going to probably subscribe and like all the Panthers podcasts and all the Panthers news. For sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Expect to gain a lot of new Twitter followers. I'm sure everyone will want to hear about whether or not the Panthers will be signing Taylor Moton to a long-term extension over the next 11 days. So I got into the Riot Report. The Panthers, much like the Bucs, are a young, kind of a younger media fan base. So there wasn't a ton of independent media that was covering the team, as opposed to, there's ESPN, there's the Charlotte Observer, there's AP, there's other, kind of the big guys. And there wasn't that independent voice that could kind of, whether it was speak up for the fans or just to kind of provide that extra coverage that we thought was important for Panthers fans and that they wanted, that they really craved. So I think that was one of the driving forces behind creating the Riot Report, stemmed out of the Roaring Riot, which is the Carolina Panthers fan base. You guys may recognize them as the streak of blue from Raymond James Stadium directly underneath the pirate ship during every Panthers Bucs game. And they we wanted to just
blue. Is it blue though?
Oh yeah, it's black and blue, but we always try
sparkly. It's more of a sparkly teal.
Are we really gonna critique uniform colors on this podcast? Because this orange, I know everybody is like, oh, the creamsicle, but I don't know if that really is like, since last year, I feel like that was more of a derided uniform than it is now. Now I feel like it's like lauded and throwback and nostalgic, and everybody loves it. But I feel like a few years ago it was kind of like, the creamsicle uniforms.
They were terrible. I was there when they wore them. It was terrible. No one liked them. It's because you lost. And something I always say, like, it doesn't matter really what your uniforms look like. If you win, they're cool.
It's true. Absolutely. Yeah. Everybody hated those neon green Seattle uniforms, and then all of a sudden it was like, these guys are good. Russell Wilson wears them, huh? Oh, Bobby Wagner's gonna wear them too. All right, they don't look so bad. I guess someone might buy them.
Yeah, Beast Mode. Marshawn Lynch is gonna wear them. Yep, they're gonna go win Super Bowls with them. They're cool as hell.
Yeah, exactly.
So you mentioned we're joking about the uniforms though, but you mentioned things are cool when you're winning. Unfortunately, the Panthers haven't done a lot of winning. You look at it; their last winning season was 2017. They've been 5-11 each of the last 2 years. Josh, what is the psyche right now and the mindset of the Carolina Panthers fan?
Well, I would say bruised, to say the least. Bruised, but perhaps optimistic. The way that the Carolina Panthers 2020 offseason went, and that's not this offseason, that's last offseason, how that offseason went, it turned a lot of fans, whether it was against the team or made them frustrated with the team's decisions. I'm sure you guys in Tampa Bay are used to the idea that you just, every time that you feel like somebody that you really like is on the team, all of a sudden they're gone. And last offseason, you had not only the turnover in coaching staff from Ron Rivera to Matt Rule. Ron Rivera fired 4 games before the end of the 2019 season, but you had Cam Newton, Luke Kuechly, Greg Olsen all gone within the span of about a month. The way that they handled the Cam Newton situation was laughable, to say it nicely, and awful/terrible, to say it truthfully. Greg Olsen took a couple shots at the team on his way out, on the way that they let him go, and obviously Luke Kuechly with the surprise retirement. So you couple all that with the team keeping their old GM, who the fan base and kind of rightfully didn't like, Marty Herney, kept him around for an extra year, and some of the ownership decisions that are a little bit onerous or questionable. And so there has just been a lot of kind of murkiness in what it means to be a Carolina Panthers fan and where the Carolina Panthers are going. And so the idea is that you have this new coach, now you have a new GM, you should be all kind of heading in the right direction. But even still right now, you ask questions of like, are they trying to win the Super Bowl this year? Like, did they trade for Sam Darnold because they think Sam Darnold is the quarterback of the future? Or did they trade for Sam Darnold because David Tepper told them they couldn't have Teddy Bridgewater on the roster anymore? Like, these are the questions that we don't know the answer to. And if they, and with a guy like Sam and the bigger question, I'm sure we're going to get into it, is Sam Darnold even an upgrade from Teddy Bridgewater? Yeah. Personally, I'm not so sure. But I think that is the real division between the fan base right now, is whether you're a person that thinks Sam Darnold can lead this team into the future, or whether you look at it and say, what did they give up assets for? What is this team doing right now?
Yeah, it sounds a lot. We just talked to D. Orlando, who writes for the Journal for Atlanta, and it sounds like it's sort of the same boat. Like, from the outside looking in, it seems to be divided, like what exactly is going on. There's a miscommunication, because what they're telling you and what they're doing don't be lining up as the same things. Like we're doing this. Well, if you're going for a Super Bowl, then why did you do this? Or we're rebuilding. Well, if you're rebuilding, then why did you do that? And it seems to be off and on. But let's start, let's sort of pick up from when the season ended to free agency. Who did you lose? Who do you think is going to hurt that you lost? Who you're glad that's gone, if there is any? And who did you bring in to sort of fill the holes? Because even though I'm sure we'll get to it, I think the Panthers have spent 11 draft picks on defense the past 2 years. It wasn't obvious. That was sort of like their Achilles heel, at least last year, yards given up and things like that. So season ends, free agency hits, who comes, who goes? How do you think they did?
Sure. So on the offensive side of the ball, their biggest losses are one went in the division. Backup running back Mike Davis, who was spectacular for them with McCaffrey missing 13 games, went to Atlanta. And then Curtis Samuel, who was kind of a fan favorite, and I hesitate to call him a gadget wide receiver because he's much better than that. But he was a do-it-all guy that had over 1,000 yards rushing and receiving last year, could line up in the backfield, was just a huge threat to score a touchdown every time he had the ball in his hands.
Do you think last year was the first year they really figured out how to use him?
I don't think so. I think that the only reason they figured out how to use him is because they didn't have Christian McCaffrey on the field. And so I think that made it that many more touches available for their third wide receiver. I thought he was never, for me, it was like, he's a lot. Obviously, it's never great when you lose a good player. But I thought that with DJ Moore, Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey, there's just not that many. There aren't 100 more touches for Curtis Samuel to get. So I think that he battled injuries the first 2 years of his career and was just kind of learning how to play in the NFL. And I think last year he played. I believe he played all 16 games. If I'm not mistaken, maybe 15 out of 16 games. And that was the reason why he was so successful, was he was able to stay on the field, able to practice, and able to get the ball in his hands because Christian wasn't out there.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna mention Mike Davis a little later on, but you brought him up here with the losses. When I went through and I looked at the departures and the acquisitions, that's the name that really stuck out because Christian McCaffrey missed so much time last year, and you guys were so dependent on Mike Davis, and he provided the passing another set of hands. I think were very surprised at his pass catching abilities. Of course, we here at the Pewtercast weren't, because we saw him 4 times over the last 2 years, and I seem to remember him. He had a couple of pretty big performances against the Buccaneers. But is it worse losing Davis, or is the real sting that you lost Davis and you're going to have to see him twice a year on the other sideline?
Well, I don't think the Falcons are going to be very good next year. So I don't feel like that is as big of a threat. Just like you said, I don't know whether they're rebuilding, but they're doing a bad job of whatever they're doing down there. But it's I think that obviously Mike Davis is a good player. I liked interacting with him. He's a funny guy, very nice to the media, was interested in talking to us to kind of learn more about him, and went out there and played hard. He was like the Matt Rule. He was a perfect Matt Rule player. Went out there, did his job, put his head down, and played hard on every single snap. I think the running back group is got worse, obviously. Even though if Christian McCaffrey plays all 16 games, obviously that makes a huge difference. But if you just look at it from a depth perspective, they replaced Mike Davis with fourth round pick Chuba Hubbard and Reggie Bonifant or Rodney Smith, whoever you want to kind of sub in there as their third running back. So I think that the running back group as a whole, in terms of depth, did get a little bit worse with the loss of Mike Davis. So, you can't bring everybody back. It's a numbers game. They obviously have been focusing on the defense the past couple of years. And so that has been something that I almost wonder whether their goal has been let's get the defense as talented as possible, and then let's go back and fix the offense after we get the defense on the right track.
Right. So with, the big loss of Samuel and, a very reliable depth piece and a guy that can actually carry the load in Davis, as your losses, who did you bring in, or who did the Panthers bring in that you think will help this team, or what was something that fans were excited to see come in?
Yeah, a couple of key acquisitions. First one, second round pick Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU. Big wide receiver, reuniting with Joe Brady, who was his offensive coordinator there in Baton Rouge. And so I think is somebody that can come in, and he doesn't have to be the number 2 wide receiver. He can be somebody that make big plays occasionally, and then when Robbie Anderson gets big money elsewhere, he can kind of step up and take another leap in a couple of years. But I think that is somebody everybody here in Carolina, the coaching staff, fan base, media is very excited about. They also signed, maybe a little bit under the radar, pass catching tight end Dan Arnold from Arizona, the guy that led the Cardinals in touchdowns. A huge red zone threat. Panthers were awful in the red zone last year. When I say they were awful, and I think a lot of the blame for their offensive struggles, whether it was in the red zone, whether it was in the fourth quarter, whether it was wherever, was placed solely on Teddy Bridgewater. And I'm not 100% sure that makes sense. That doesn't track to me, but they went out and they fixed a few of the problems that they had without a big target in the end zone. Obviously, Christian McCaffrey wasn't there. So if Christian is back for 16 games, that's going to help Sam Darnold. So I think that, they're trying to make it easier on Sam than it was on Teddy to succeed in Carolina. But I think Dan Arnold and Terrace Marshall are kind of the 2 big weapons. And then they brought back Taylor Moton.
Yeah, and you mentioned Christian McCaffrey, trying to be back for 16 games, and one of our commenters is asking, would McCaffrey be the number 1 overall fantasy pick? If he's playing 16 games, there's no doubt that he belongs as the number 1 guy in fantasy. I want to ask you, because we mentioned Sam Darnold early on, and I look at what happened with Darnold in New York with the Jets. 13-25 as a starter. He only had one of his 3 years where he even threw for more than 3,000 yards.
Really?
He had
Wow.
a 2,200 yard season last year, 2,800 in his rookie year, and 3,028 yards in season number 2. I almost look like, is Matt Rule like ready to die on this? Everybody says you got to pick your hill to die on. Is Matt Rule ready to die on the Sam Darnold hill?
Why in the hell is Sam Darnold a Carolina Panther?
Those are two very interesting questions, and I would say the answer to the second one is that David Tepper was not going to have Teddy Bridgewater come into this year as a starting quarterback.
You've mentioned
no
that
matter
twice.
what.
Why?
He is an owner that wants what he wants, and we're still learning. I mean, David Tepper only bought the team in 2018.
Right.
So we're still learning what kind of owner he is. And I think that we are learning that he is an owner that preaches patience, but maybe doesn't have a ton of it. And is an owner that
sounds like Dan Snyder, Jerry Jones level.
I don't know if we're ready to put him on that level, but I think he does he wants to win. And he's not going to be, obviously every owner wants to win, but he's going to spend a lot of money and he wants to see a return for that money. So I think that's kind of where he's at. And I think that, their previous GM, Marty Herney, made a bet on Teddy Bridgewater and sold, whether he sold Matt Rule or whether he sold David Tepper or whether he sold the whole organization on Teddy Bridgewater. And Teddy Bridgewater came in and was exactly what Teddy Bridgewater has always been. And they just were not satisfied with that. Plus, it's tough to go into another year of Teddy Bridgewater with the fan base the way it was. Teddy was in a no-win situation, replacing the most popular player in franchise history. In a real cluster of a situation. They signed Teddy Bridgewater and then an hour later announced that Cam Newton could seek a trade. So it's like, and that was 2 weeks after Cam Newton and Matt Rule had both done a bunch of rounds at the Super Bowl saying that they were really excited to play with each other. And, this is Cam Newton coming off. You guys are eminently familiar with Cam Newton, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So it didn't go very well. So Teddy was never going to be able to be a popular player here, especially when a team goes 5-11. It was never going to work out. And you're right. Is Matt Rule going to die on Sam Darnold hill? I don't know, but he is putting a lot of his chips into the Sam Darnold basket.
Is it because he has to, or is this the guy that's sort of been thrust upon him? And I shouldn't put it that way, but you say like there was come hell or high water, Teddy Bridgewater was not going to be the quarterback for the Carolina Panthers. So the Panthers had to do the best they could do pre-draft to get a guy that, would help them the best, that would win. So, logic would suggest that what they could afford and what they wanted to spend and what they had to do in the draft going forward, that Darnold end up being their guy. So you just sort of said that Matt Rule's sort of putting a lot of eggs in the basket. Do you feel it's more of, hey, this is my quarterback, I'm trying to win, he's the best quarterback, he never got a chance, blah, blah, blah? Or is it really like, this is the guy that Matt Rule wanted?
I think it might be a little bit more of the first than the second, because Panthers made a real run at Matt Stafford, and they ultimately lost out to the LA deal. Then they were very involved in the Deshaun Watson negotiations, and then obviously we know where that turned out.
Right.
And so then you got to a couple weeks before the draft, and they're telling everybody that will listen that they're still interested in taking a quarterback with the 8th pick, which I don't think was ever really an option for them. But I think that they wanted a quarterback, and they didn't love anybody that wasn't Zach Wilson or Trevor Lawrence in this draft. Whether that's going to be a mistake, we're going to find out. And they really felt like they looked at the tape on Sam Darnold. They saw enough that they could maybe coach him up and turn him into the quarterback that made him the number 3 pick in the draft. And I think that's kind of as simple as that. They couldn't go into the year with PJ Walker and Will Grier, and they wanted to upgrade that quarterback position, or change the quarterback position. Sounds a little bit more appropriate to me. And so Sam Darnold was the best quarterback available via trade, and that's what they went out and did.
So, according to you, or I should say, according to the team likes Sam Darnold better than Justin Fields, who was available to them, and that you knew that going into the draft.
They didn't want us to know that going into the draft, but we knew it as soon as they didn't draft Sam Darnold. As soon as they didn't draft Justin Fields with the 8th pick.
That's true. So let's talk about the draft. Who did they draft? What do you like how they did it? Did they fill out the nice spots? I know Carney wants to ask about Horn and what he's going to bring. I know we talked a little about free agency, but you guys brought in Bouye on the other side. So what did you think that the Panthers' game plan was going into the draft? Did it match up to what you thought? And in the end, did you end up liking what the Panthers did overall?
Yeah. Okay. So we'll attack it a couple questions at a time. The first part is, they went in with J.C. Horn like right at the top of their list. Actually, that's not true. The Penei Sewell was the guy that they wanted to draft. That's why they were telling everyone that they wanted a quarterback, because they were hoping somebody would trade into the 7th pick ahead of them and draft Justin Fields so that they could then take Penei Sewell. Penei Sewell ends up going 7th. The pick that gets offered to them was, I think, the Vikings. A couple other teams were on the line with them. The Bears probably were on the line with them. They didn't like that deal as much as they liked J.C. Horn. And let me be clear, J.C. Horn is going to be awesome, is going to be a tremendous cornerback in the NFL. The guy is big, the guy is fast, the guy is strong, and has all the technique and obviously, the pedigree that he has with Joe Horn as his dad. So J.C. Horn is going to be an incredible cornerback. And when you look at stats and analytics, the first corner taken in the draft is almost always works out. Almost always is a guy that is like, well, this guy can lock down one side of your field. Now, whether or not that's something that you value as worth a top 10 pick, I think you could question. But I think that was they had 3 huge holes going into this draft, which was quarterback, left tackle, and corner. And left tackle was Penei Sewell, wasn't available. Quarterback was available, but they didn't like him as much as they liked J.C. Horn at corner. And that was ultimately what they went with. And Matt Rule has said specifically that he likes the idea of getting Sam Darnold and J.C. Horn rather than Justin Fields by himself. Like, he likes those. He wanted those two, like getting those 2 players versus just the quarterback, he thinks was a better way to go. So
that's a slick way of putting it.
It's one of those things where you're like, and then when you drill down a little bit longer, it's like, that's not really how it works. But
that's not what happened, but okay. Great point. It's a lie.
Yeah. And then they went out and they filled a lot more holes. They Terrace Marshall, they traded down. So their new GM, Scott Fitterer, was formerly of Seattle, and Seattle is a team that has traded down every single year, always, constantly. And it would appear that the Panthers are now going to do that. So are going to be a team that trades down. They had, I believe, the record for most trade downs in a single draft for the Panthers was 4. And Fitterer traded down 5 times in the first 2 rounds. So
I remember that this year.
Yeah, so they amassed a lot of picks. They had 11 draft picks this year. So they added a lot of talent, and they added a lot of guys. So whether they added a lot of talent is another question. But I think that this was and I kind of have made this point throughout this offseason. This was the offseason they should have had last year in Matt Rule's first season. Was they should have been trading down and amassing a bunch of draft picks and bringing in a bunch of young guys, maybe taking a shot on a quarterback that hadn't been good in the past few years. So it's like, but when you push it back a year, it just kind of muddies the water on what's the timeline look like, what are they trying to do, and so I do like a lot of the moves that they've made. I'm just a little bit confused about what the overall story is.
Yeah.
Can certainly understand that, and definitely understand the quantity, maybe more than the quality for the draft. But you did mention the quality of J.C. Horn. I am curious as to how you think he's going to stack up, because they're going to throw him. You're getting drafted, 8th overall. You're going to get thrown right in the fire, and you know, this division's wide receivers core that he's going to have to go up against. I mean, he's going to have to face Mike Evans and Chris Godwin here in Tampa. He's going to have to face Calvin Ridley in Atlanta. He's going to have to face Michael Thomas in New Orleans, and he's the bigger of the two. You know, Bouye is not as big as J.C. Horn. If my memory serves me correctly, because Horn's 6'1", and I think Bouye is like 5'9" or 5'10", so they're going to want to have him against the Ridleys, the Evanses, the Michael Thomases. How close do you think he is to ready to face maybe three of the better wide receivers in the entire NFL twice a year?
That's a great question. We're going to find out like week 2, right? Is that who?
To be determined.
Let me just check. Week. When do they play? Week 2 they play New Orleans. So it's going to be Mike Thomas right off the bat. But I think that they're going to roll him out there. You mentioned Bouye a couple times. I'm not sure that Bouye is the starter opposite. Opposite J.C. Horn. I think Dante Jackson is a guy that is still in the final year of his deal. Has always been is incredibly talented. Has always been and last year was really, really good when he was able to stay on the field. So I think that if he can stay healthy, AJ Bouye is suspended for the first 2 games of the year. So if Dante Jackson is able to stay healthy, I think he's going to maintain that spot. I think AJ Bouye is a veteran leader that they brought in that can kind of coach up these young guys, that can be a voice in the locker room, and obviously can play if he needs to. Because in a 17-game season, you're going to need it. You're going to need as many players as you can get because somebody's going to get hurt. And that's just a foregone conclusion.
Yeah. So thanks for setting us straight on that, and that's why we bring these experts on. What are some of the players that the Panthers drafted that fans are excited about?
Yeah,
I feel like we've only talked about Horn.
Yeah, a couple guys. I think that they in the 3rd round they had a 2nd round grade on a guy named Brady Christensen, who was a BYU, who was a left tackle at BYU. They had him actually as a 2nd round guard. And a 3rd round tackle, and they ended up getting him after trading down, and so they really like him at guard. I'm not sure that he's going to start there this year, but this is a guy that was one of the best left tackles in the league and was protecting Zach Wilson. So he was really good. I think a lot of people are excited about him and the prospect of him on the offensive line. Tommy Tremble is a tight end out of Notre Dame. That is, I think might slot in as a blocking tight end right now, but is a guy that they feel like can be a raw player. And had like one of the best quotes after the draft was, somebody said like, you say you have a violent style of play. What does that mean? And he was like, well, I'll show you when I put dudes on their ass on the field. It's like, all right, awesome.
Okay.
I was like, yeah, let's go, Tommy Tremble. Run
There
through
you
the
go.
Zoom call right now. But I think that, they got a lot of guys, and just like you said, yes, it's a lot of quantity, but the draft is a real crapshoot. So if you can hit on 4 of those 11 guys, that's enough. You give yourself more bites at the apple. So I think that's a big plus for them. I want to ask you guys, and I don't know whether you're going to give me a question segment at the end, but I have a question for you guys. If that is appropriate.
No. There is no structure to this podcast.
Yeah, we're
just 3 guys talking ball.
When you guys, when the Bucks brought in Tom Brady, right? Was there? Yeah, obviously, avocado tequila for everybody. Was there like a ramp up to it where you thought to yourself, hey, this team is like super talented, so I think they might be in the market for Brady, like, or for one of these high end quarterbacks? Because I think the Panthers are building their team a little bit in that mold where they're making their roster, they're just improving the roster. They're having all these weapons on offense, all this young exciting defense, and they have a couple holes, just like you guys did. You had a hole at left tackle, you fill it with Tristan Wirfs, and you bring in Tom Brady, and then it's like, boom, this team is ready to win the Super Bowl. And in today's NFL, there are just quarterbacks available. Is Aaron Rodgers going to be available to sign? I mean, he's going to be on a different team next year. Like,
Russell Wilson.
Is Russell Wilson going to be available? Is Deshaun Watson going to be available? Is Matt Stafford going to be satisfied in LA? Like, all these guys that are just going to be, you could just plop in a future Hall of Fame quarterback. So when that was happening for you guys, was that something that you felt like you were heading towards?
Go ahead, Tom. Or Steve. Tom. I always want to call you Tom Carney. It was a kid I grew up with. I played baseball with him for like 8 years in a row. Anyway, sorry, Tom/Steve Carney.
For me, I was working at the Bucks flagship station at the time, and I was absolutely flummoxed when they said, "Oh yeah, Tom Brady has agreed to," because I'd been on the air going, "There's no way Tom Brady is coming here. Tom Brady's going to come here." No. And I figured we were going to sign Jameis Winston to some, team friendly 1 year prove it kind of deal, or he was going to end up getting, I didn't think they were going to franchise tag him, but I thought that they would have him back in 2020. It was like, but when Tom Brady signed here, let's go. I mean, it's amazing to think that, really it was, you had Tom Brady at quarterback, Tristan Wirfs on the offensive line, Antoine Winfield in the defensive backfield, and let's go to work here, boys and girls. I certainly didn't think that you were going to get the running back production out of Ronald Jones, and then bringing in Leonard Fournette late in the preseason. I certainly didn't see a Super Bowl run coming, even with Tom Brady coming here. I didn't foresee what we saw here last year. I just didn't.
For me, it just happened so fast because, one, you have to take into account that no one really knew Tom Brady was leaving. I think it was more like 80-20, and 80 was like, Tom's not going anywhere. Like, we've heard this for 3-4 years now. He's not doing anything. Then it was like, yeah, Tom Brady's actually leaving, and he's in serious talks with the Bucks. And then 2 hours later, it's like Tom Brady's a Buccaneer. So there really was no this time to be like,
right.
And we weren't thinking, kind of like to your back to your question a little bit, like we weren't thinking like, okay, look at this team. All we need is a tier 1 quarterback and we can go places, because the fan base was heavily invested in Jameis Winston. We just spent 5 years with him.
And we've been left at the altar by people coming from New England in the past. See Bill Parcells twice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, the plan wasn't, and no one sort of had done this before, like Peyton Manning went from a winning franchise to a winning franchise. Like there wasn't like going from the most winning franchise for 2 decades to the second most losing franchise in the past 2 decades besides Cleveland, So it wasn't this thought process that, gosh, if Jameis just leaves, then of course Phillip Rivers or Tom Brady or Russell Wilson will want to come here. And it's like, no, because the coaching staff was so poor under Dirk Cutter and Lovie Smith that none of these guys really got developed. We'd bring in free agents and they would regress because of the coaching staff. So BA got here in 1 year and everyone's arrow started to trend up. I'm talking totally all along the offensive line. Now, of course, we had players like Devontae David and Mike Evans and the stars, the guys that you draft on your fantasy team. But the third rounders, the fourth rounders, the undrafted free agents that make the special teams, and then 2 years later, they're like your third wide receiver. There was none of that. Like Dirk Cutter, if you weren't a pro and knew how to be a pro, Dirk Cutter had no time for you whatsoever. He was not concerned at all in developing and coaching you to be a pro. Once you became a pro, then he was all about it. Just look at Ronald Jones' rookie year. Like he touched the ball like 50 times, ran for like 49 yards, and like that was it. But Ronald Jones said he was a little mature. He didn't get into the playbook as much as he should. He didn't understand. He didn't know. But the coaching staff, like, well, that's your problem. Go figure it out. Like you gave no direction. It's like, well, how do you boil water? Well, if no one tells you, you're going to struggle. You've never done it before. So from your point of view, I can see that, thinking that the Panthers are sort of following this pattern. But as a fan and media member, no one saw this as a pattern going forward because it wasn't. The idea was Jameis Winston was going to be our franchise quarterback for the next, hopefully 2 decades, do a Tom Brady thing. And then BA came in for 1 year, and you can't win ball games throwing 30 interceptions and fumbling 6 more times. Like, you just can't win ball games. So they went and looked to see, like he kept saying, what's behind door number 2? And he opened the door and it was Tom Brady. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let's do that. And then you really started to see second year under a tier 1 coaching staff, these players start to blossom, even the veterans getting better, everyone being on the same page, the communication being better. And then you throw in Tom Brady and bring in Gronk and bring in, Antonio Brown and Leonard Fournette. It's ridiculous. It's a Madden team. It's an all-star team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a miracle that it worked. It really is. But yeah, so there wasn't this big brainstorm of just, if we just have one more guy who happens to be the best player to ever play the game.
Sure.
You can say that for any team. So that would be
you broke the mold on that. I don't think there has ever been a team that has been like, I mean, obviously a quarterback other than Peyton Manning switching teams. It's just never happened of that ilk. Right. I'm just trying to
Favre,
think, maybe, but yeah, maybe Favre. I was thinking like Joe Montana, but he was already on the decline. But I mean, so
Drew Brees was a big question mark when he left the Chargers. So you didn't know you were going to be Drew Brees.
Yeah, exactly. Sam Darnold, same thing. So I mean, no, I'm just joking. So it's like you look at but that's like what, 4 quarterbacks over the span of 25 years. So it just doesn't happen very often.
Right.
And
now
so
it does.
it's just. And now it does. Last year there were 5 3 future Hall of Famers that switched teams. I would imagine that'll be the case going forward. So, as the NFL becomes more and more like the NBA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, guys will want to play play together. Hey, I've never played with I want to play with this guy, and you're going to see, and like you said, with Russell Wilson now. And his unhappiness in Seattle, we don't know what's going to go on with Deshaun Watson. It could be very interesting to see how things could start to shake out around the NFL. I do want to ask you, Josh, about your offensive line. Now, you brought in a couple. The Panthers brought in a couple of guys, free agency wise. The big one being Cameron Irving. I know that.
Sorry.
I know.
It makes me laugh a little bit that it's like big free agent signing was Cam Irving, but
on the offensive line. Well, I mean, and one of your guys wrote it in the Riot Report. There's not been a franchise left tackle in Carolina since Jordan Gross decided to hang up his spikes. I know you said that they really wanted to go after Sewell in the draft, but how much longer? It's like how many more times can you bash your head against the wall before?
Oh boy!
Why doesn't your team have a left tackle, Josh?
I don't know. I think you would have to ask. Wouldn't you have to ask so many other teams in the NFL that same question?
We're not talking to all the other teams.
Wasn't for lack of trying. They've tried to bring in a left tackle. They've just gotten it wrong. They brought in Matt Khalil for 5 years, $55 million. That I think they're still paying off. Hasn't been on the team in 3 years. They drafted Greg. They traded up and drafted Greg Little last year, and he has hasn't been good enough. Has proven that he can't play in the NFL, which is funny because I have one of the guys that writes for us, the managing editor, Vincent Richardson. He is a huge Greg Little fan, and I keep telling him, like, you got to just give up on Greg Little, man. Like, if he couldn't start over Trent Scott, couldn't start over Dennis Daly, like all these like 6th round pick Dennis Daly is starting over him, undrafted free agent Trent Scott is starting over him. Like, the guy is just not like. I don't care how good his tape looks. It doesn't matter if the coaching staff doesn't want to play him. There's a reason for it.
Vincent, stop dying on Greg Little.
Exactly. So it's like Greg Little, I think, is closer to getting cut than he is to being the starter. And this is a guy that they traded up for in the 2nd round last year, or 2 years ago, excuse me. So I think that's a problem. They've tried to go out there and get him, and they just haven't found the right guy. And so they've tried to piecemeal this thing together with, Cameron Irving. And I think in my mind, I think it's Cameron Irving's spot to lose, but I think Trent Scott is going to ultimately end up being the starting left tackle for this team. And I wonder if it's just like we talked about a little bit in the last segment, and I just mentioned, I think that's just kind of like, they're just like, hey, we don't have our left tackle right now. Like the guy that's starting a left tackle, Trent Scott, Cam Irving, whoever, like that's not the left tackle of the future for the Carolina Panthers. But he's who's going to have to occupy that side of the line until they can find somebody else to take the spot.
So where do you think, and I guess a better way to put it is, do you think where the fans think is a realistic shot where the Panthers are going to be this year? Like, because they always have the fans that are doomsday.
Sure,
and then
yeah.
You have the fans that are ride or die. It's like, oh, we could win every game. Like we could. I mean, things have to happen, but we could win every game. And then you have the fans that are like kind of spot on. So like roughly, like, are we talking about like are people think like you're going to contend for division? Is there playoffs talk? Is playoffs locked up, or is it more like, well, we'll get them next year?
Well, here's a sentence that I did not expect to be saying all throughout this offseason. But I think that they're not going to compete for the division as long as the Bucs are the team that they are. That is a.
It's funny how that sounds, isn't it?
It like hurts my tongue coming off. It feels weird coming out of there. It's like I'm speaking a different language. But yeah, I mean, as long as Tom Brady is in the NFC South, I think that the Bucs are always going to be the prohibitive favorites to win the division. But I think that the Panthers, if Matt Rule and Joe Brady can do what they have been telling us that they can do, and that is turn Sam Darnold into not a great quarterback, just an average quarterback. He does not have to be Tom Brady or Drew Brees. He can be, as long as he's not Jameis Winston or Sam Darnold, then I think that this is a team that can at least compete for a playoff spot. I don't think they're going to be a team that's like, hey, we might be in the NFC Championship at the end of the year, but I think that they could be, 8-9, 9-8, 7-10, 10 and like in that, especially if things go their way. This is a team that was 2-9 in one-score games last year. That's a regressive stat. That always comes back to the mean. So even if they were 5-5 in one-score games,
so much.
Exactly. Well,
you're right, but I've been hearing it as a Buck fan forever. It's like, well, you were 1-8, and we just talked to D Orlando, and he threw that same stat out for the. Yeah. You know why? It's because your team sucks. Like you're not any good. That's why you're losing those games, because you're not any good. It's like, if you can turn that around, well, yeah. I mean, yes, if you win more games than you lose, you'll have a good record.
Yeah, but who turns those stats around are good teams. Good teams don't worry about those. Don't worry about those stats.
Yeah,
and I think I'm curious. I'm curious what your thoughts are on the 17 game schedule. Do you like the extra game, or do you think maybe they should have gone to 18? So you could have the extra home game as well as an extra away game. What do you think of 17 regular season games, and then maybe going to 18 and maybe 2 preseason games?
Hey, sorry, I think I lost you there.
It's okay.
Audio, but I think you were asking just like on the 17 game schedule.
Yeah. Are you good? What do you think? What are your thoughts on going to 17 games in the regular season and 3 in the preseason? And do you think they should have waited to go to 18?
No, it's stupid. It's a huge money grab, and it's going to end up costing players their careers. And it is another example of how the NFL kowtows to their owners instead of to the players that are actually making their team, making their game better. 17 regular season games the NFL pretends to be very involved and care a lot about player safety, but can we curse on this show?
Sure.
They don't give a shit about player safety. All they keep, every single thing that they continue to do, all it does is just it's just leading you down the path of, well, whatever, get those guys out there on the field. And adding another game, especially when you look at this team at last year when they didn't have OTAs and mini camps, and there were less soft tissue injuries, especially towards the beginning of the year. And then this year they were like, no, OTAs and mini camps can't be virtual. because you've got to get those guys in the building, and they've got to have preseason games where they can have fans, 17 games where they can sell an extra ticket, where they can make an extra $1 billion on a TV deal. I hate the idea of a 17th game. It also, like, 16 games, 32 teams. It was such a perfect schedule. And now you end up with, like, the Panthers are playing at Houston on Thursday night. Dope. Awesome. That's just what everybody wanted to see.
I'm glad somebody thinks similarly to me, because I don't like the seven, having an odd number of games. I think, I agree with you about the money grab thing. I personally don't like preseason to begin with. And I think that
I agree with you.
Yes. Ren is flabbergasted. And I had a guy.
I'm a roster guy. I'm a guy that likes to fill out the roster and see how many of the original 53 I get right, which, by the way, I'm like 51 for 53 pretty much every year. So
there you go.
I need those preseason games that's what it is. I mean, a battle of my ego. Like, those guys can go out there and play meaningless games, so I can fill out my fake roster.
Fill out your fake roster, and so DraftKings can make more money.
Yeah, sure. I cut you off, Josh, because you triggered me with that 1 score game stat, but it's fine.
No, it's totally fine.
Yeah. So where do you think? Where do the fan base think? Like, I
was hoping you wouldn't come back to this. I don't. I think, again, I think that this is a team. I think that they have such a huge wide range of outcomes, and I know this is a huge cop out, but Dan Orlovsky tweeted out, like, well, if Sam Darnold plays like a top 5 QB and the offensive line plays well, the Panthers can be a playoff team. And it's like, isn't that true for literally every team in the league? Like,
thanks, Dan.
Yeah. For real. If Trevor Lawrence plays like the number 1 pick and their offensive line is good, the Jags are going to be okay too. I think that this team has a huge wide range of outcome, and if Sam Darnold plays like he did last year, they're going to end up being 3-14, which is another thing. The 17 game schedule sucks, so I have to say stuff like 3-14. But I think that this defense is young, and I really like Phil Snow. I think that Phil Snow, their defensive coordinator, did a better job on his side of the ball than Joe Brady did on the offensive side of the ball. Joe Brady got a bunch of head coaching interviews because he's young and he's a hot name, and Phil Snow is in his early 60s. But when you look at what Phil Snow was able to do with a young defense that was, I wouldn't say void of talent, but you had multiple undrafted free agents starting in on that defense, and they were able to keep them in games for a lot of the season. So I think that this defense is going to take a step forward, and if Christian McCaffrey plays all 16 games, the offense is going to play better. But ultimately, if Sam Darnold's going to throw 25 interceptions, none of that matters. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with you, and it's not really a cop out. It's fair. It's when you have, and it's the same thing when we talk to when we talk to the Saints guy, Mike Neighbors. Yeah, we talked to him. Their defense, there's a lot of unknowns. Unproven depth, and that are guys gonna have to step up because they lost guys in free agency. You don't know what Sam Darnold's gonna do. You don't know what the offensive line is gonna do. So if everything works out, and everyone plays to their top or what you think they can play best at, then you're looking like 10 wins and possible pushing for the playoffs. But if somebody gets injured, or you win some games you're not supposed to, but you lose some games you're supposed to win, you're looking more, it gives you that 3-game sort of wiggle room. So I get it, because it's lots of change and lots of unproven players there. So I think we're gonna leave it there. Josh, I know you got to go, so why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, so all Bucs fans can subscribe to all your podcasts.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And jump on Riot Report. There will.
I've already done it.
There will be some Buc fans that will listen to your pod
the week of,
sure.
Right? Yeah,
for sure. And then there's going to be even probably a bigger amount that are going to jump in and just troll your chat rooms on the blog. So
we love it. Bring it on in. You can check out theriotreport.com. I actually am just coming off of paternity leave. I just had a baby daughter 5 weeks ago. So, hey, thank you. So that's why I look so tired. And the Riot Network, I host One Day Contract or I'm on One Day Contract, which is a rotating show where we have media members just like you guys do, except all of ours are Panthers media members. So Joe Person, Elena Getzenberg, Jonathan, anybody that covers the Panthers, we bring on a new one every week. So
Newton,
subscribe to that one.
My boy Newton.
Of course. Give him hell. My guy Dave.
Give him hell.
Yeah. And there's a ton of other stuff you can check out. TheRiotNetwork.com. There's a podcast to fit every Panthers fan. And I'm sure there are a ton of Panthers fans listening right now. So check those out and follow me personally on Twitter at Josh Klein Rules for Panthers takes. And I also talk about submarine sandwiches and Dave Matthews Band as well.
So you got me hooked.
At the end.
I was going to say you hooked me with submarine sandwiches.
I was in with submarine sandwiches. There was Dave Matthews like,
yeah, left you right out the door. No, it's all right. Yeah. Well, it's the summertime. Things are happening.
It's all right. It's fine. I'm not anti Dave Matthews. I'm just not pro Dave Matthews either.
I was pro Dave Matthews back in the 90s when I would go to Dave Matthews concerts to find girls in sundresses. This was long before I was married.
They're still out there, Steve. They're still out there. They're just getting a little bit older, just like we all are.
A little more haggard.
To bring it full circle, Matt Rule before the draft was he asked every player, like, you know how they always do like weird questions to the draft prospects. He would ask them who their desert island band was. They could only listen to one artist for the rest of their life. Who would it be? And I asked him who his was, and his was the Dave Matthews Band. And then we had a very awkward conversation about Dave Matthews Band in the middle of a Zoom press conference that Panthers PR, I'm sure, was super pissed at me about. But I was like, who's your favorite? Like, what's your favorite song? Are you excited for the tour to happen? Like, what?
You guys went down a Dave Matthews rabbit hole with like 50 people wanting with their virtual hand up.
We did, yeah. And everybody's like, can we talk about the 3 technique? And I'm like, yeah, okay, but do you think that One Sweet World is a good opener, or like do you like to open with a little bit more of a punch?
You like to go open with Trippin' Billies? Or...
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice. All right, Josh.
Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you down the road.
Definitely. Thanks for having me.
All right, that is Josh Klein of the Riot Report. Oh, that just ended so much better than I thought it could ever end.
Yeah.
So enjoyable to have Josh on, and congratulations to him and his better half on the new baby girl as well. So, you got anything else for this week there, Ren?
Well,
have you seen anything else? Yeah, anything else going on?
Tree fell down in the front yard.
Lord,
help into pieces and drag it to the can.
That's always
that
fun.
Big thunderstorm. It was just part of it. I don't know. It's like 3 trees growing together or whatever.
I have a friend of mine who restores classic cars, and she and her husband, and they had their carport go down. Luckily it didn't go down on the new, or I should say the new, the Porsche 914 that they've been working on for a while. So
there was a story somebody told me. It was like when I was living down in the Miami area, and maybe people remember, or they won't, but like 5 hurricanes came through like in 2 weeks down there. None of them were devastating. They were just all this kind of like little baby hurricanes, but like they were just lining up like in a queue, just waiting to pound the Miami area. And when finally it all is over and everyone's sort of back to work and doing their things, everyone's swapping stories. And this guy goes, yeah, I was talking to my uncle, and his neighbor comes up and knocks on his door and goes, hey, Henry, your carport's in my front yard. And Henry goes, I don't have a carport. I don't know what you're talking about, man. That ain't my carport. You're cleaning that up, not me, buddy.
Ain't my carport. He got one.
No, I thought that was a good thing with Josh. It was nice to find out about Bouye, sort of like where they were. The whole Sam Darnold. Like I had no idea that Tepper was like, Teddy Bridgewater's not playing for us come hell or high water, which could be big trouble when you have an owner who makes personnel decisions like that.
Yes, because then he becomes Jerry Jones or Dan Snyder.
Yeah.
And so
you were spot on with that. Josh just wasn't ready to call his GM
Dan Snyder,
yeah.
his owner, Dan Snyder.
He's like, I'm not there yet.
I get it. Well, I mean, at least with Jerry Jones, he's got 3 Super Bowl rings. Yeah, I yes, they were all 25 years ago or longer, but he still can hold up. Look, I got 3 Super Bowl rings that tell me that I know what I'm doing.
I'll tell you, Steve. The Cowboys are the best team in the nation.
Oh God. My best friend, President Clinton, so, but yes, so Jerry Jones has Super Bowl rings. Dan Snyder,
I don't even. It's like
I just thought it was great. I thought I was going to get him to compare David Tepper to
the
Dan
dumpster
Snyder.
fire
So
last.
good.
The dumpster fire, like a dumpster that's actually on fire, like watches the Washington football team and goes, "Oh, that's not so bad." It's like when we used to watch Jerry Springer. Well, at least I'm not those people,
Yes.
So, like, I don't even want to get into the Washington football team, but I thought it was good information. I liked it a lot. I liked Josh. Like you said, that was a great closing, and I'm excited to have him back on. But so that wraps us up, right?
Yeah, we have done the NFC South in full. So we have taken a look at the New Orleans Saints, the Atlanta Falcons, and now the Carolina Panthers. And you can all go back and check out our conversations with Mike Neighbors of Cox Sports Television and D. Orlando Ledbetter of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution on our archive, which is at thepewtercast.com, and also wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and on YouTube, youtube.com/thepewtercast. You can get it all there for you. So
what do you want to do next? I think we should have like a recap show of sort of what's gone on since we've done like an actual Buck show.
Yeah,
and then probably I guess just start with the opponents, right?
Yeah, I would think that getting we've got the Dallas Cowboys coming up on Thursday night here. Oh well, I mean, for the regular season, but we've got preseason games here coming up 4 weeks from now.
I like preseason. Yeah, it's only like a month away. So
4 weeks from now, we will be into preseason football. And I know I despise preseason football just because
I do now.
Well, I just don't like preseason football because I had to produce it for so long, and there is nothing to be gained on a radio broadcast. I mean, there's so many times that you can have me and Ronnie Lane and John Gilmore and Anthony Beck going, yeah, you look good.
Yeah, you look good. Yeah, possibility.
What you think of that? What you think of this
make the team?
Yeah. What you think of that? What you think of this guy? Yeah, look good.
What did you think of the 8 plays Levante David did?
Yeah, look good.
He looked good.
Didn't hurt himself.
Exactly. How many times was that said? The important thing is he didn't get hurt.
Yeah, it seems like every single preseason game that we would do, that was the first thing out of Ronnie Lane's mouth. Well, at least we got through the entire game with no injuries. Player.
It's so funny.
It's the best. I love Ronnie Lane. I really did enjoy producing Buccaneers radio, and so I'm not gonna have to do it this year, as far as I know. So
who knows? But you are going to do a bunch of stuff with USF, right? Like, didn't Vinnick hire you?
Yeah, the Vinnick Sports Group. I am technically employed by them. I haven't worked for them in about 6 weeks, but because I did Toronto Raptors basketball and USF basketball, and so that's all been done. USF basketball ended in the end of May or the end of March. And, the Toronto Raptors got done May 16th. So I've been sitting around here on my tuckus doing Rays baseball for the last 6 weeks, almost exclusively. Yeah. So it should be fun.
All right. Well, that's it, man. Yeah. So I guess we'll do a Bucks recap show. And then since there's only really like 4 weeks till preseason, maybe just sort of touch on the big games, Dallas, Bills, Patriots, of course. And, we can almost like break it. We can almost break down, quarter wise and see how things feel. So we'll see how that works. But as we get out of here, we always finish off with the Ren addiction. Ren,
Where do they find you?
Best place to find me is on Twitter at the Pewtercast. Find me is on Twitter at the Pewtercast. I have completely almost abandoned at Rendax there. I should probably change that eventually. I really got to decide on a new program to use because no PNG downloads are free anymore. Anyway, no one cares. It was upsetting. It was like, because I did a lot of research to find out which one I wanted to use and which one, sort of worked with my brain the best that I could figure out the easiest. And I started using it, and then like a month later, they're like, "Oh, you want PNG downloads? Yeah, now it's going to cost you. It's like $12 a month, and it's like I need it once. Like I need to change some words like one time, like a week, and then just re-download that. So anyway, no one cares. Yeah, I know, sons of bitches. Best place to find me is at the Pewtercast on Twitter. I'm always down to talk Buccaneers football, but if you think your take is too hot and don't want to put it there on Twitter sphere, feel free to slide into the DMs, and I'll talk Buccaneers football with you there as well too.
And you can follow me on social media. I am at Steve Carney. StPete9.com for your best Rays breakdowns.
Wander.
The Wander Franco era is officially underway, and we'll see if the Rays can finish off a split in Washington, D.C. before they head to Buffalo. At least they're going to Buffalo in July and not in December, like could be possible for certain teams in the NFL. Thankfully, not the Bucs.
All right.
So until next time, Ren, you ready?
I am. Go ahead.
Too funny. Go buck yourself.